Hi, my beautiful family. Welcome back to Life-Changing True Stories. Today, I bring you a powerful and deeply loving story. Sophia Martinez had always believed that hard work and integrity would be enough to succeed in life. At 29, she had climbed from an intern position to become the head marketing strategist at Ashford Luxury Hotels, one of the most prestigious hospitality chains in the country. Her campaigns had increased bookings by 40% in just 2 years. And her creative vision had transformed the brand's image from stuffy and old-fashioned to modern and aspirational. She arrived at the office every morning at 7, stayed until the work was done, and poured her heart into every project. Her colleagues admired her dedication, and her presentations were legendary among the marketing team. But success at work meant nothing when tragedy struck at home. 3 weeks ago, her younger brother Daniel had been hit by a drunk driver while crossing the street near his university. The accident had left him with severe spinal injuries that required immediate surgery. The kind of complex procedure that insurance would only partially cover. The remaining cost was staggering $200,000. Sophia had spent sleepless nights calling hospitals, researching medical loans, and begging financial institutions for help. Every door had closed in her face. Her savings barely covered $20,000. And no bank would approve a loan large enough to cover the rest. Time was running out, and with each passing day, Daniel's chances of walking again diminished. She had rehearsed this conversation with her boss 100 times in her mind. Richard Ashford was a self-made billionaire who had built his empire from a single bed and breakfast in Colorado to a global chain of 5-star properties. He was 42, devastatingly handsome, with silver streaks in his dark hair, and known for his sharp business mind and even sharper tongue. People called him brilliant but cold, successful but unapproachable. In 3 years of working directly with him, Sophia had never seen him smile genuinely, never heard him ask about anyone's personal life, never witnessed a moment of warmth that wasn't calculated for business purposes. As she stood outside his corner office on the 65th floor, watching the city sprawl beneath the floor-to-ceiling windows, Sophia took a deep breath and knocked 3 times. His voice came through the heavy oak door, smooth and commanding. "Come in." The meeting that changed everything. Richard was standing by the window, hands clasped behind his back, looking out at the skyline. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent, and his posture radiated the kind of confidence that came from always being the most powerful person in any room. He didn't turn around when she entered. "Sophia, I assume this is about the Thompson account." His tone was businesslike, distant. "Actually, sir, it's a personal matter. I was hoping we could discuss my compensation." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. Now he turned, one eyebrow raised slightly. His eyes were a striking pale blue, the kind that seemed to see through pretense and politeness straight to the truth beneath. He gestured to the chair across from his massive mahogany desk and took his own seat. Fingers steepled in front of him. "I'm listening." Sophia sat on the edge of the chair, her prepared speech suddenly feeling inadequate. "I've been with the company for 3 years. My work has consistently exceeded expectations, and the results speak for themselves. The Singapore campaign alone generated $15 million in new bookings. I'm requesting a salary adjustment that reflects my contributions to the company's growth." Richard leaned back in his leather chair, studying her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. Several seconds of silence stretched between them like a tightrope. When he finally spoke, his words were measured and deliberate. "Your work is exceptional. I've never disputed that. But compensation isn't just about results, Sophia. It's about leverage. What you're worth versus what you're willing to accept." He paused, his gaze never leaving her face. "You've never asked for anything in 3 years. Not a raise, not a promotion, not even an extra day off. So I have to wonder what's changed. What's desperate enough to bring you to my office, asking for more money?" The question caught her off guard. She had expected negotiation, maybe even rejection, but not this probing into her motivations. Heat crept up her neck as she decided whether to reveal the truth. Something in his expression told her that lies wouldn't work with Richard Ashford. "My brother was in an accident. He needs surgery that I can't afford." Richard's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Interest, perhaps, or calculation. He stood and walked to the bar cart near his bookshelf, pouring 2 glasses of amber liquid from a crystal decanter. He offered one to her, and though she rarely drank during work hours, she accepted it. The whiskey burned pleasantly down her throat.
How much do you need?
He asked, his tone almost casual. $200,000? He didn't flinch at the number. Instead, he took a slow sip of his drink and returned to the window, looking out at the city again. When he spoke, his words came from somewhere darker than she expected. I could give you that money, Sophia. I could write a check right now, and it would mean absolutely nothing to my bank account. But I didn't become successful by giving things away for free. He turned back to face her, and the intensity in his gaze made her heart race. Everything has a price. The question is, what are you willing to pay? The unthinkable offer, Sophia's mind raced through possibilities. Extra projects, longer hours, a contract binding her to the company for years. She could handle any of those things if it meant saving Daniel. What do you want? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Richard moved closer, stopping just a few feet away. He wasn't touching her, wasn't crowding her space, but his presence felt overwhelming nonetheless. When he spoke, his words were quiet but carried the weight of something that couldn't be unsaid. Spend one night with me. One evening, no strings attached, no expectations beyond that. In exchange, I'll cover your brother's surgery completely and give you a bonus of $50,000 for any additional expenses. Tomorrow, we go back to being employer and employee, as if nothing happened. You'll get your raise too, because you've earned it professionally. The world seemed to tilt sideways. Sophia's first instinct was to throw the whiskey in his face and walk out. But Daniel's face flashed through her mind. His smile before the accident, the way he used to play guitar on their apartment balcony, his dreams of becoming a teacher, all of that would die if she couldn't pay for the surgery. The doctors had been clear. Without the procedure, he would be paralyzed permanently. With it, he had an 80% chance of full recovery. Why? The question escaped her lips before she could stop it. Why would you make an offer like this? Richard's expression remained unreadable, but something almost vulnerable passed across his features before disappearing. Because I want to know if anyone would choose me if money wasn't part of the equation. Because I'm tired of not knowing what's real anymore. And because you're the first person in a decade who looks at me like I'm human instead of a walking bank account. The honesty in his admission surprised her more than the proposition itself. She had expected cruelty or entitlement, not this strange mixture of loneliness and raw need. Sophia realized with startling clarity that Richard Ashford was as trapped by his wealth as she was by her poverty, just in different ways. I need time to think, she managed to say. You have until 5 o'clock today. After that, the offer expires, and we'll never speak of it again. His tone had returned to its usual business-like cadence, but his eyes still held that strange vulnerability. The impossible decision Sophia spent. The rest of the day in a fog of moral confusion. She tried to work on the Amsterdam marketing proposal, but couldn't focus on anything except the choice before her. Was she really considering this? Selling herself for money made her feel sick. But it wasn't just money, it was Daniel's future, his ability to walk, to live a normal life. Wasn't that worth one night of compromise? She called the hospital during lunch and spoke with Daniel's doctor. The news was worse than before. They needed to perform the surgery within the next 2 weeks, or the damage would become irreversible. Each day of delay decreased his chances of recovery. The doctor's words echoed in her mind as she sat in the company cafeteria. Unable to eat the sandwich she had bought, her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. Daniel asked about you today. He's trying to stay positive, but I can see he's scared. We'll figure something out, Mia. We always do. Except they wouldn't figure it out. Sophia had exhausted every option. This was it, the last door, and it was painted in shades of gray that made her question everything she thought. She knew about right and wrong. At 4:45, she found herself standing outside Richard's office again. Her hands trembled slightly as she knocked, and this time she didn't wait for permission to enter. He was sitting at his desk, working on his computer, but looked up immediately when she walked in. His expression gave nothing away. I accept, Sophia said, her voice firm despite the chaos in her heart. But I have conditions. This happens once and only once. Tomorrow, we never mention it again. You transfer the money for Daniel's surgery tonight before anything else happens. And this doesn't change my position in the company. If you fire me or demote me afterward, I'll expose what happened." Richard stood slowly, nodding as if he had expected nothing less. "Agreed to all of your terms. The money will be in your account within the hour. I'll send you the address of where to meet me at 8 o'clock tonight. Sophia," he added, and hearing her name in his voice without the usual professional distance made her stomach flip. "I want you to know that you can change your mind at any point. Until the moment you walk through that door, you're free to leave. I won't hold it against you." She nodded, not trusting herself to speak, and left his office. As the elevator carried her down to the lobby, Sophia caught her reflection in the polished metal doors. The woman staring back looked like a stranger, someone who had just agreed to something. Unthinkable to save the person she loved most in the world. She wondered if she would recognize herself after tonight, or if this decision would change her in ways she couldn't yet understand. By 6 o'clock, the money had appeared in her bank account, accompanied by a simple text from Richard. "The surgery is scheduled for tomorrow morning. I've already spoken with the hospital." Despite everything, a wave of relief washed over her, so powerful that she had to sit down. Daniel would be okay. Whatever happened tonight, whatever price she paid, her brother would walk again. In that moment, it felt worth it. At 7:30. Sophia stood in her apartment bathroom, looking at the simple black dress she had chosen. It wasn't provocative or obviously seductive, just elegant and understated. She had pulled her dark hair into a low twist and applied minimal makeup. As she looked at her reflection, she made a decision. She wouldn't go into this night as a victim or a transaction. She would go with dignity, with her eyes open. And if there was a way to reclaim some power in this situation, she would find it. The address Richard had sent led to a private penthouse in the most exclusive building in the city. As Sophia rode the elevator to the top floor, her heart pounded so loudly she could hear it echoing in the small space. The doors opened directly into his apartment, and what she saw took her breath away. The entire space was made of windows overlooking the glittering city, with soft lighting and modern furniture that managed to feel warm despite its minimalist design. Richard stood by the window, still in his suit but with his jacket removed and his sleeves rolled up. He turned when she entered, and something in his expression had changed from the calculated businessman of that afternoon. "You came," he said simply, as if he hadn't quite believed she would. "I keep my promises," Sophia replied, stepping into the apartment. The door closed softly behind her, and with it, she felt the last of her old life sliding away. Whatever happened next would define her in ways she couldn't yet comprehend, and as Richard moved closer to her, she understood that this night would be far more complicated than either of them had anticipated. The penthouse was nothing like Sophia had imagined. She had expected something cold and ostentatious, a display of wealth meant to intimidate. Instead, the space felt surprisingly intimate. Soft jazz played from hidden speakers, and the lighting was warm rather than harsh. A bottle of wine sat breathing on the coffee table next to two glasses and through the windows. The city looked like a constellation of stars brought down to earth. Richard gestured toward the sofa, and Sophia sat carefully, maintaining her composure even as her nerves threatened to overwhelm her. He poured wine for both of them, his movements precise and unhurried. When he handed her a glass, their fingers brushed, and she noticed his hand wasn't quite steady. The realization surprised her. Richard Ashford, the man who commanded boardrooms and closed billion-dollar deals without breaking a sweat, was nervous. "Thank you for transferring the money so quickly," Sophia said, needing to break the silence that stretched between them. The hospital called. "Daniel's surgery is scheduled for 7 tomorrow morning." Richard sat in the chair across from her, rather than beside her on the sofa, maintaining a respectful distance that confused her expectations. "I spoke with his surgeon myself. Dr. Patterson is the best in the country for spinal injuries. I made sure Daniel would have the absolute best care available." "You called his doctor?" Sophia's surprise was evident in her voice. "You didn't have to do that. I wanted to." Richard took a long sip of his wine, and for the first time since she had known him, he looked uncertain. "Sophia, I need to be honest with you about something. This arrangement, what I proposed, it wasn't really about what you think it was about." Sophia set down her wine glass, her heart beginning to race. Then what was it about? Richard stood and walked to the window, his profile illuminated by the city lights. When he spoke, His voice carried a weight of loneliness that made her chest ache. 3 years ago, I was engaged. Her name was Victoria. She was beautiful, intelligent, charming. Everything anyone could want. We met at a charity gala, and she pursued me relentlessly. I thought I had finally found someone who saw past the money, who wanted me for who I was. Paused, and Sophia could see the tension in his shoulders. 2 weeks before our wedding, I overheard her on the phone with her sister. She was laughing about how she had convinced the cold billionaire to fall in love with her, how she would be set for life once we were married. She called me a lonely fool who was so desperate for affection that he couldn't see the obvious trap. The raw pain in his admission made Sophia's anger at him soften slightly. She began to understand the test he had created, the twisted logic behind his proposition. So you made an offer that would prove I was just like her, that I could be bought. No. Richard turned to face her, and his eyes held genuine anguish. I made an offer that would prove you weren't like her. Victoria would have taken the money and found excuses to avoid following through. She would have manipulated the situation to get what she wanted without giving anything in return. But you, he moved closer, kneeling in front of the sofa so they were at eye level. You came here prepared to honor an agreement that was deeply unfair to you, to sacrifice your dignity for someone you love. That kind of integrity is something money can't buy. Sophia felt tears prick her eyes as she understood what he was saying. This was a test? You put me through this emotional torture as some kind of experiment? It was wrong. I know that now. Richard's voice broke slightly. I've been so twisted up by betrayal and loneliness that I forgot how to trust anyone. I forgot how to be human. When you walked into my office today, desperate and honest and willing to do anything for your brother, I saw something I hadn't seen in years. Real love. Not the performance people put on for money or status, but actual selfless love. And I wanted to know if that kind of person could exist in my world. Or if I was destined to spend my life surrounded by people who only saw dollar signs when they looked at me. A different kind of intimacy. Sophia wiped away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. Her emotions were a tangled mess of anger, relief, and something else she couldn't quite name. That doesn't make what you did right, Richard. You manipulated me when I was at my most vulnerable. You're absolutely correct. It was cruel and selfish, and I'm sorry. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. His touch was gentle, almost reverent. I transferred the money with no expectations because I realized halfway through our conversation this afternoon that I had become the very thing I despised. A person who uses wealth as a weapon. Your brother will get his surgery regardless of what happens tonight. You can leave right now, and I'll still give you that raise and the additional $50,000. I won't hold this over you or make your life difficult at work. Sophia looked down at their joined hands, trying to process everything. Then why am I here? If you're giving me an out, why go through with any of this? Richard's thumb traced small circles on the back of her hand, and she felt warmth spreading from that simple touch. Because despite my terrible approach, despite the unforgivable way I went about it, I meant what I said. I'm drawn to you, Sophia. Not just physically, though you're the most beautiful woman I've ever seen, but because of who you are. The way you light up when presenting a new campaign idea. The way you always remember everyone's birthday in the office. The way you kept working even when I know you've been drowning in worry about your brother these past weeks. You're real in a world full of artificial people, and I wanted one night to know what it feels like to be close to someone genuine. The confession hung in the air between them, vulnerable and raw. Sophia realized that somewhere in the past hour, her perception of Richard had shifted completely. The cold businessman had revealed himself to be a damaged man who had forgotten how to connect with people without suspicion. She thought about leaving, about walking away from this complicated situation and pretending it never happened. But something held her there, some spark of curiosity about this man who hid such depths beneath his corporate armor. Tell me about your life, Sophia said quietly. Not the public biography everyone knows. The real story. Richard's expression showed surprise, but he settled onto the floor in front of the sofa, still holding her hand. For the next hour, he talked. He told her about growing up in poverty in rural Montana, about a father who drank away every paycheck and a mother who worked 3 jobs to keep them fed. He described how he had put himself through community college by working construction during the day and studying at night. how he had built his first property with a loan from a teacher who believed in him. He talked about the isolation that came with success, how every friendship seemed transactional once people knew his net worth, how he had learned to keep everyone at arm's length because trust had burned him too many times. "I have everything anyone could want," Richard said, his voice heavy with irony. "Houses around the world, cars I never drive, more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. But I go weeks without a real conversation. Without someone looking at me and seeing Richard instead of Richard Ashford, the billionaire. Do you know what that kind of loneliness does to a person? It makes you crazy. It makes you do things like proposition your employee in a desperate attempt to feel something real." Sophia found herself sliding off the sofa to sit beside him on the floor, their backs against the furniture. "I understand loneliness," she said softly. "Maybe not in the same way, but I know what it's like to feel isolated. Since my father died, I've been responsible for my mother and Daniel. Every decision I make affects them. I can't date casually because I don't have time. I can't take risks with my career because they depend on my income. Sometimes I feel like I'm watching my own life from behind glass, unable to fully participate because I'm too busy keeping everyone else afloat." "That's why you're so good at your job," Richard observed. "You understand sacrifice. You know how to put something bigger than yourself first. Most people in marketing are chasing personal glory. You're building something that matters." They talked for hours, the wine forgotten, as conversation flowed more naturally than Sophia had experienced in years. Richard shared stories about disastrous business meetings and the eccentric characters he had encountered in the hotel industry. Sophia told him about Daniel's terrible jokes and her mother's superstitions, about growing up in a neighborhood where everyone knew everyone else's business. They laughed together, genuine laughter that felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. The unexpected turned somewhere around midnight. Richard stood and offered his hand to help Sophia up. "I want to show you something," he said, leading her through the penthouse to a set of French doors she hadn't noticed before. They opened onto a private terrace with a view that took her breath away. The entire city sprawled beneath them, and above, stars were visible despite the urban glow. "I come out here when I can't sleep," Richard explained, guiding her to a cushioned bench. "It helps me remember that I'm just one small piece of something much larger. All my problems, all my wealth, none of it means anything in the grand scheme of the universe." Sophia sat beside him, acutely aware of the warmth of his body next to hers. The night air was cool, and without thinking, she shivered slightly. Richard immediately shrugged out of his vest and draped it over her shoulders. The gesture was so simple, so genuinely caring, that it made her heart constrict. "Richard," she said quietly, turning to face him, "I'm not going to pretend I understand everything about tonight or about what you've been through. But I know one thing with certainty. You're not the monster you think you are. A monster wouldn't have felt guilty about his proposition. A monster wouldn't have given me the choice to leave. A monster wouldn't have spent the evening sharing his pain with someone he barely knows." He looked at her with such intensity that she felt it in her bones. "You barely know me, Sophia. How can you be so sure? Because I've spent 3 years watching you when you didn't know anyone was looking. I've seen you take calls from your properties at midnight because a housekeeper was having a family emergency. I've watched you quietly pay for employees, children's college tuitions, and pretend it was a company scholarship program. You hide your kindness behind business decisions, but it's there. You're just terrified of being taken advantage of again." Richard reached up and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch feather-light. "You see too much. Maybe you need someone who sees you clearly." The words came out barely above a whisper, and suddenly the space between them felt charged with possibility. This wasn't the transactional encounter Sophia had steeled herself for. This was something else entirely, something that terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. When Richard leaned in to kiss her, it wasn't demanding or presumptuous. It was a question, gentle and tentative. Sophia answered by closing the distance between them, her lips meeting his in a kiss that felt like falling and flying at the same time. It deepened slowly, both of them exploring this unexpected connection with wonder rather than urgency. They moved back inside eventually, the kiss evolving into an embrace on the sofa, talking between kisses, learning the landscape of each other's hearts. When Richard finally asked if she wanted to stay, his voice was hesitant, offering her the choice without pressure. Sophia said yes, Not because of their agreement or the money or any obligation, but because something genuine had sparked. Between them in those hours of honest conversation, the morning after Sophia woke to sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows and the smell of coffee. For a moment, disorientation clouded her thoughts, and then the previous night came flooding back. Not with shame or regret, but with a sense of wonder. She had expected to feel used or compromised, but instead she felt seen in a way she hadn't experienced before. Richard appeared in the doorway of the bedroom carrying a tray with coffee, fresh fruit and croissants. He had changed into casual clothes jeans, in a simple sweater that made him look younger and more approachable than his usual suits. "Good morning," he said with a small, uncertain smile. "I wasn't sure how you take your coffee, so I brought cream and sugar." Sophia sat up, pulling the sheet around herself, suddenly shy in the morning light. "Black is fine, thank you." She accepted the cup, and they sat in comfortable silence for a moment before she checked her phone. "Daniel's surgery starts in 20 minutes. I know. I've been checking with the hospital since 6. Dr. Patterson called me personally to say everything is proceeding exactly as planned." Richard set down his own coffee cup and looked at her seriously. "Sophia, about last night, don't." She held up her hand, stopping him. "Don't apologize for what happened, or try to categorize it into something neat and simple. Last night was complicated and messy, and more honest than anything I've experienced in a long time. I don't regret it, but I also don't know what it means." Relief washed over Richard's features. "I don't regret it either. And you're right, I don't know what it means. But I know I don't want last night to be the end of getting to know you. Not as your boss, not through some twisted arrangement, but as two people who apparently have more in common than we thought." Sophia smiled despite herself. "Are you asking me on a date, Richard Ashford? I'm asking if you'd be willing to give me a chance to do this right. To start over without the power imbalance and the desperate circumstances, to see if what we found last night could be something real." His vulnerability was complete, no armor or pretense remaining. Before Sophia could answer, her phone rang. The hospital. Her hand trembled as she answered, and Richard moved closer, offering silent support. The surgeon's voice came through calm and pleased. "Ms. Martinez, I'm happy to report that your brother's surgery was a complete success. The repair went better than we hoped. With proper physical therapy, Daniel should regain full mobility." Tears of relief streamed down Sophia's face as she thanked the doctor and ended the call. Richard pulled her into his arms, holding her as she cried. And she realized that this man she had thought she understood had revealed layers of complexity she was only beginning to discover. The weeks following that night were the strangest of Sophia's life. At work, she and Richard maintained strict professionalism. They communicated through proper channels, kept meetings brief and focused on business, and gave no indication that anything had changed between them. But beneath that surface, everything had shifted. Richard started small. He sent flowers to the hospital room where Daniel was recovering. So not ostentatious arrangements, but a simple bouquet of sunflowers, because Sophia had mentioned once that they were her favorite. He texted her updates throughout the day about Daniel's progress, having apparently instructed the entire medical team to keep him informed. When Sophia tried to thank him or discuss what had happened between them, he simply said, "Let's just focus on your brother getting better. Everything else can wait." Daniel recovered faster than anyone expected. The surgery had been a complete success, and his physical therapy progressed remarkably well. Sophia visited him every evening after work. One night she arrived to find Richard already there, sitting beside Daniel's bed and talking about guitars. Her brother was laughing at something Richard had said, his face more animated than she had seen it since before the accident. "You didn't tell me your boss was cool," Daniel said when he noticed Sophia in the doorway. "He just offered to get me a guitar from this vintage shop in Nashville." Sophia shot Richard a look that clearly said they would be discussing this later, but he just grinned, unrepentant. After Daniel dozed off, she walked Richard to the elevator. "You can't buy my brother expensive gifts," she said, trying to sound stern but failing. "It's not expensive. It's a used guitar from a shop I happen to know because I bought my first property in Nashville. And it's not a gift, it's an investment in his recovery." The physical therapist said music therapy would be good for him. Richard pressed the elevator button, then turned to her with surprising seriousness. Sophia, I'm not trying to buy your family's affection or manipulate the situation. I genuinely like Daniel. He's funny and smart, and he doesn't look at me like I'm a walking checkbook. Can I just be a person who does something nice for someone I'm getting to know? The sincerity in his voice melted her resistance. Okay, but Richard, we need to talk about what's happening here. What are we doing? Having dinner with me tomorrow night, Richard said as the elevator arrived. Not as your boss, not as someone you owe anything. Just as Richard asking Sophia if she'd like to share a meal and continue the conversation we started that night. What do you say? Building something real their first official date was nothing like Sophia expected. Richard picked her up in a modest sedan rather than a limousine, wearing jeans and a casual button-down shirt. Instead of an exclusive restaurant, he took her to a small Italian place in a neighborhood far from the business district. The owner greeted Richard by name, hugging him like family. I've been coming here since I opened my first hotel, Richard explained as they sat in a corner booth. Marco and his wife Rosa gave me my first real taste of what family feels like. When I was building the business and eating ramen every night, they'd let me wash dishes in exchange for a meal. Throughout dinner, Sophia saw sides of Richard she had never glimpsed at work. He talked about his dreams of opening affordable hotels for working families, not just luxury properties for the wealthy. He described a foundation he was quietly building to provide business loans to entrepreneurs from underprivileged backgrounds. He was passionate and animated, nothing like the cool executive she had known for 3 years. Why do you hide all of this? Sophia asked over dessert. Why pretend to be someone you're not? Richard was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. Because vulnerability in business is seen as weakness. Because the moment people know you care about something, they try to use it against you. I learned early that showing your heart means giving people ammunition. So I built walls. The problem is, I built them so high that I forgot how to let anyone in. Is that what you're doing now? Sophia reached across the table and took his hand. Letting me in? Trying to. It's terrifying, honestly. Every instinct I've developed over 20 years of business tells me to protect myself, to keep distance, to never let anyone close enough to hurt me. But then I think about that night at my penthouse, about how easy it was to talk to you. And I think maybe the risk is worth it. They dated slowly and carefully over the next 2 months, getting to know each other outside the context of work and crisis. Richard introduced Sophia to his world gradually, at galleries and theater performances. Yes, but also hiking trails he loved, and small jazz clubs where he could relax. Sophia brought him into her life too, inviting him to family dinners where her mother fussed over him and Daniel teased them both mercilessly at work. They maintained their professional relationship with such dedication that no one suspected anything had changed. But the awareness between them was constant and electric. Sometimes during meetings, their eyes would meet across the conference table, and Sophia would see the man behind the corporate mask. Those moments sustained her through long days and challenging projects. The truth revealed everything changed on a rainy Thursday afternoon, 3 months after that first night. Sophia was working late on a campaign proposal when Richard's executive assistant, Margaret, stopped by her office. Margaret had been with the company for 15 years and was fiercely protective of Richard. "Can I speak with you privately?" Margaret asked, closing the office door behind her. Sophia felt her stomach drop, certain that someone had discovered their relationship, and Margaret was there to warn her about company policy violations. Instead, the older woman sat down and fixed Sophia with an appraising look. "I know about you and Richard," Margaret said bluntly. "Don't panic, I haven't told anyone, and I don't plan to. But I need you to understand something about the man you're involved with. Margaret, I don't think, please, just listen." Margaret's expression softened. "I've worked for Richard since he bought his second hotel. I watched him build this empire from nothing through sheer determination and brilliant strategy. I also watched Victoria destroy his ability to trust anyone. But what you don't know, what nobody knows, except me and the accountants, is what Richard has been doing for the past 5 years." She pulled out a folder from her bag and handed it to Sophia. Inside were financial documents, payment records, and correspondence. As Sophia read through them, her hands began to shake. "He's been anonymously paying for employees' medical bills," she whispered, looking at one document that showed a payment of $80,000 for a warehouse worker's cancer treatment and their children's college tuitions. and emergency home repairs, and elder care for their parents. That scholarship program you mentioned? It's not corporate funding, it comes directly from Richard's personal accounts. He's spent millions over the years helping employees through crises. And he's made me promise never to tell anyone where the money comes from. Margaret leaned forward. That proposition he made to you wasn't about buying you, Sophia. I think part of him wanted to see if someone would care about him even when he was being his worst self. He was testing whether you would see past the terrible thing he proposed to the desperate, lonely man underneath. Sophia felt tears welling up as pieces clicked into place. Why are you telling me this? Because he's falling in love with you, and he's terrified. I've seen him sabotage every relationship by keeping people at a distance or testing them until they fail. But with you, he's different. He's trying. And I think you should know that the man you're seeing is the kind and generous person behind the business facade. That's who he really is. The cold executive is the mask. Don't let him convince you otherwise when he inevitably panics and tries to push you away. The test of truth Margaret's warning proved prophetic. 2 weeks later, Richard showed up at Sophia's apartment unannounced on a Friday night. She knew immediately that something was wrong. His expression was closed off, distant in a way she hadn't seen since before their first real date. "We need to talk," he said. And the words landed like stones in her chest. Sophia let him in, her heart already breaking because she recognized what was happening. He was scared, so he was running. They sat in her living room, the space between them on the sofa feeling like miles. "This isn't working," Richard said, not meeting her eyes. "The relationship, trying to balance work and personal life. It's too complicated. I think we should end things before someone at the company finds out, and it becomes a scandal." "Look at me," Sophia said firmly. When he didn't, she repeated it louder. "Richard, look at me." He finally met her gaze, and she saw the fear beneath his cold expression. "I know what you're doing," she continued. "You're panicking because things are going well, so we're getting close, and your instinct is to destroy it before I can hurt you. Margaret told me about the employees you've been helping. She told me that you're scared of being vulnerable." Surprise flashed across Richard's face, followed by anger. She had no right. She cared enough about you to make sure I understood who you really are. Now, I'm asking you to make a choice. You can keep running and protecting yourself, building higher walls, and staying lonely. Or you can trust that I'm not Victoria, that not everyone will betray you, and that what we have is worth the risk of being hurt. Richard stood abruptly, pacing to her window. "You don't understand what it's like. Everyone wants something. Everyone has an angle. How can I trust that how can you trust that I won't hurt you?" Sophia finished, standing to face him. "You can't. That's what trust is, Richard. It's choosing to believe in someone even when you can't be certain. I could get hurt too. You have all the power in our professional relationship. You could fire me, ruin my career, make my life miserable if things go wrong between us. But I'm choosing to trust that you won't, that the man I've gotten to know over these months is real." Tears were streaming down her face now, and she didn't bother to wipe them away. "I love you. I didn't plan to, and I certainly didn't expect to after how we started. But I love the man who visits my brother and makes him laugh. I love the man who secretly helps employees through crises. I love the man who took me to meet Marco and Rosa because they represent family to him. That's who you are, not the scared, defensive person standing in front of me right now." The confession hung in the air between them, vulnerable and raw. Richard stared at her, his expression cycling through disbelief, fear, and something that looked like hope. "You love me?" His voice cracked on the words. "I love you," Sophia repeated. "And I think you love me too, which is why you're here trying to end things before they can become real. But I'm not going to let you run away from this. If you want to leave, you'll have to actually walk out that door and mean it. I won't make it easy for you to sabotage the best thing either of us has found." "Okay." Richard crossed the space between them in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "I'm sorry," he whispered against her hair. "I'm so sorry. You're right about everything. I'm terrified. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, for you to reveal that this was all an act. But even if that fear, I can't imagine my life without you in it anymore." He pulled back just enough to look at her face, his thumbs wiping away her tears. I love you, Sophia Martinez. I loved you before that night, watching you work and wishing I could know you beyond the walls of our office. I loved you when you walked into my penthouse, prepared to sacrifice yourself for your brother. I love you more every single day, and it scares me to death because I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be loved or how to love someone without trying to control everything. Then we'll figure it out together, Sophia said, standing on her toes to kiss him. You don't have to be perfect, Richard. You just have to be honest and keep trying. That's all any of us can do. A new beginning 6 months later, Sophia stood in front of the bathroom mirror in Richard's penthouse, now adjusting her dress for the company gala. She had been promoted to Chief Marketing Officer 2 months earlier, a promotion she had earned entirely on merit. After they had disclosed their relationship to the board and established appropriate oversight to avoid conflicts of interest, the revelation had caused some waves. But Richard's reputation and Sophia's track record spoke for themselves. They navigated the scrutiny with grace, maintaining professionalism at work while building a life together outside the office. Daniel had made a complete recovery and was back at university, pursuing his teaching degree with newfound determination. He and Richard had bonded over music, and it wasn't unusual for Sophia to come home to find them playing guitar together on the terrace. Richard appeared behind her in the mirror, fastening his cufflinks. "Are you ready for tonight?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her waist. "As ready as I'll ever be to attend a party with 200 people who are all curious about us," Sophia replied with a nervous laugh. "They can be curious all they want. I don't care what anyone thinks anymore." Richard kissed her neck softly. "I spent so many years worried about perception and control that I forgot how to actually live. You changed that. You changed everything." Sophia turned in his arms to face him. "We changed each other. You helped me see that I don't have to sacrifice my own happiness to take care of the people I love. That it's okay to want things for myself." "Speaking of wanting things," Richard said, suddenly looking nervous in a way that made Sophia's heart skip. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "I know we agreed to take things slow, and I'm not asking you to answer right now. But I want you to have this, to know that I'm serious about building a future together." Sophia opened the box with trembling hands to find a stunning ring, elegant and understated, exactly her style. "Richard, it's a promise," he interrupted gently. "A promise that I'm done running, done testing, done questioning whether you're real. When you're ready, if you're ready, I want to spend the rest of my life proving that I'm worth the risk you took on me. But for now, I just want you to know that you're it for me. No one else. No doubts. Just you." Tears blurred Sophia's vision as she looked from the ring to the man holding it. The man who had started as her demanding boss, who had propositioned her in her darkest hour, who had revealed himself to be broken and lonely and desperate for connection. The man who had learned to trust again because she had shown him that love didn't have to mean control. "Put it on," she whispered. "I don't need time to know what I want. It's you. It's always been you, even when I didn't want to admit it." Richard slipped the ring onto her finger and she pulled him into a kiss that held every promise they were making to each other. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling through happy tears. "So," Richard said, his voice lighter than she had ever heard it, "should we make an entrance at this gala, as the newest engaged couple in the company?" Sophia laughed, the sound full of joy and possibility. "Let's give them something to talk about." As they walked into the gala hand in hand that night, Sophia reflected on the unexpected journey that had brought them together. It had started with desperation and manipulation, with a proposition that should have destroyed any chance of a real connection. But somehow, through honesty and vulnerability, and the courage to see past their worst moments, they had found something neither of them had expected. Genuine love, built on mutual respect and trust. The path hadn't been easy, and Sophia knew there would be more challenges ahead. But as Richard squeezed her hand and smiled at her with such open affection that it took her breath away, she knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. No masks, no games, no tests. Just two people who had learned that the greatest risk in life isn't opening your heart. It's never opening it at all. The ballroom was full of elegant people in designer clothes, all turning to look as they entered. Sophia saw curiosity, speculation, and yes, some judgment in those gazes. But she didn't care. She had learned something valuable from the whole experience. That other people's opinions mattered far less than living authentically and choosing love even when it was complicated. Richard leaned down to whisper in her ear, "Thank you for seeing me. The real me. Not the money, or the power, or the persona. Just me." Sophia smiled up at him, her heart so full it felt like it might overflow. "Thank you for letting me in. For trusting me enough to let the walls down." As they moved into the crowd, ready to face whatever came next together, Sophia touched the ring on her finger and felt nothing but gratitude. The proposition that had started everything had been wrong, manipulative, and born from pain. But it had also been the catalyst for both of them to confront their fears and discover that real love, was worth every risk. Every vulnerability, every moment of uncertainty, sometimes the worst beginnings led to the most beautiful endings. And as she looked at Richard, seeing the happiness and peace in his expression that had been missing for so long, Sophia knew that their story was just beginning.